Hello, my name is Wally, and we're here to talk about the Living Dying Duet. And I'm wearing a hat this time because of the lighting. If I don't have the hat on, it looks like I have a dent in my head, which is not completely accurate. So I'll go ahead and wear the hat. What I'll do for this conversation is I'll start out very briefly talking about what the Living Dying Duet is in a nutshell. And then after that, we'll go through the whole thing with everything about how it developed and what it means. So usually, in general, we talk about living, about life, and then death and dying and death. So there's living and it comes to an end, and then there's dying. There's life, the end of life, and death. And uh, that's the way we normally think about it. My dementia has shown me a different way of looking at this. And that is that within each of us, within me, within you, living and dying are both present. They are both within me, and I'll talk about me because I only like to talk about myself so nobody else thinks that I'm implying something for them. Living is active within me, dying is active within me, and I do have a way to try to influence them and at least influence myself how I relate to them. So that's the living dying duet in a very brief summary, and we'll go over it. Before I start getting into the details, let me express something else that's important to understand. None of what I'm going to say today, and none of what's in down here in the corner, the Alzheimer's Conversation.com, that's my journal where everything that's happened on my dementia journey, I just put there. None of it is a plan. I did not sit down and plan out what I'm going to say today or anything that's happened related to dementia. Things happened, things flowed, and I went along with the flow that happened. And that's how I kept coming up with things. I didn't come up with them. I came up with them because the flow led me to a place, and I simply felt them, and put them in my journal and felt them and acted on them. So if you're looking for, wow, is this all organized and developed? No, this is all about going along with the flow of what has happened with me since being diagnosed with dementia. So having said that, let's go through where the what led to the Living Dying Duet came from, how it developed, where it's at now, and and based on that, what it means for my life as of right now. I started out like everybody, born, raised, grew up, uh, went to college, marriage, family, career, uh, life with its bumps and its ups and downs and all that stuff, but living life the way the normal understanding is. And then the dementia came along, the diagnosis of dementia about 3 years ago. From the first moment of the diagnosis of dementia, it changed everything, changed lots and lots of things. It changed the balance of thinking and feeling, that how I function, how I am. My cognitive is going down, means I'm thinking less, and I feel that's leaving a lot of space for my feeling to be much more prominent in my life. So it's not that it's switched one above the other. I feel like it's in the different, and my feeling is a better balance given that. Uh, it's also changed, for example, about recognition of noise and self. Because my brain doesn't work so much anymore, I readily identify noise. If I don't need to hear it or think about it, I call it noise and I don't deal with it. I just don't have the capacity anymore to be dealing with things. So I'm more identifying well, that's noise. I'm just not going to relate to that. And again, that frees up a space to say this is that's noise. This is what's me. And so I protect that. And one of the results of that is I feel I'm more authentic. The phrase I use for myself is I feel what I feel and I say what I feel. The brain doesn't get involved. What I'm talking about today, I'm expressing what I feel and what has flowed for me, not an analysis or something like that. So let me go through now in more detail exactly what happened. So I'm going along with living, and then something happened where I realized I better go to a neurologist. And I went to my doctor who sent me to a neurologist because something happened. And then I got the diagnosis. And okay, let's start right there. Here comes the diagnosis. I had been living a long life up to that point. Great. And I got the diagnosis and everything went black. To just think, feel, to have the presence of the word dementia and me, it wasn't even a possibility. So it's like the world went black. I had two words in my vocabulary at that point, death and dementia. So what had been living became dying right there. And there was living, and now I'm dying. And that's what was there. It was white and black, if you want to call it that way. It flipped immediately to that. So there had been living, now there's dying. And then as time went along, took a while to even absorb that this was happening. And then I realized, wait a second, yes, I'm dying, but I'm still living. I realized, okay, I'm still alive. I'm still walking around. I'm still in the world. So that brought the realization that yes, I'm dying, but I'm also living at the same time. They are both existing. Okay, that was a flow forward. The next flow forward was, wait a second, as I'm thinking and feeling dying and thinking and feeling about living, I'm realizing that they are actually connected, that each one is affecting how I'm relating to it and to the other. And briefly, the way I felt about it was that knowing that I'm dying, that dying made my living more immediate, and living made my dying more meaningful. So wait a second, they're really relating to each other, they're influencing each other, and that's what I call the living dying duet. Living and dying are both active within me, within my living, within myself, let me say, and they are interacting with each other. So then the next step in the flow is, wait a second, living and dying are doing their duet within me. What about me? So that's when I realized, wait a second, they're dancing their duet and I can play the music. They're dancing away. I can play the music, and the music may affect their dance, the duet that they're dancing, but it also may affect me and how I relate to myself and how I relate to them. So that led to the phrase, when living and dying dance a duet, what music will you play? And that's exactly where I got to. And if you go to this second link that's listed down here, livingdyingduet.com, you'll see that that phrase is exactly at the top because that becomes the real question. Okay, once I accept that living and dying are both present within me and that they're connected, and music is the music I play is what I have to do with it, then that becomes really important in my life. And how I'm feeling them and what music I'm playing, it becomes really central to how I'm living my life, which is living and dying, dancing their duet. That becomes really important. So that's how things started out really. But you can feel from that, it's really a flow. One step, I'll call it a step, but I think of it as a flow. It flowed, and when I flowed from one point to the next and absorbed it, the flow brought me along to the next step. And that's the way it was up to then. So let's go through the flow from that point, from when I realized that it's the living dying duet and that I have music to play. The part about dying put in my mind, in my feelings, that I should create my tombstone. That would be a natural process of what I should do next. And that was a feeling that came up, but that was very strange. I planned to be cremated, and I don't really need a tombstone, or at least not a tombstone in the traditional sense. So, but I at that point I had already learned to pay a lot of attention to my feeling. It- this whole thing since day one has been surrealistic. My life has been involved with things I would have never imagined before. So the fact that it was surrealistic, that I felt the need to create a tombstone, even though I'm not going to be buried in the traditional sense. The fact that it was surrealistic, I was already used to that and expecting it even. I don't operate by the normal rules of life that I'd been through up to that point in my life. So I went through and created my tombstone, and it took several weeks. And I have the good fortune of going for nice walks most mornings and most evenings. And that gave me a great opportunity to really feel my past, my present, what I've felt about things, what my priorities have been. And that has led to the point where I was able to create my tombstone. And it's actually a 20-word definition of uh, what I sense, how I define myself, how I see myself in the world. And that was my tombstone. And then there you go. Immediately after that, I thought, wait a second, if I spent a couple of weeks now going through and defining myself, then that's actually how I want to live my life. Not just reflecting from the past, but what I feel that that's who I am. So my tombstone became my life stone. And that's again, that's uh, a flow that came along and uh, and pulled me to the next step. My tombstone became my life stone. So again, this whole process, what dementia is leading me, is playing more and more of a role in my life, in how I'm living my life, really very practically and like that. So I'll take a moment and just stop and say what my tombstone is, the 20 words, because we're going to use that again. That'll come up again in one of the next steps. So my tombstone that I came up with after a certain amount of time that defines who I am, to feel situations I'm in and to bring my energies to make the situations richer for the people they touch. For me, that's my tombstone. I thought of it in terms of a tombstone has a limited number of words, so that's why I made it 20 words, and I think it makes sense to do it in a brief way like that. So that's my tombstone, which became my life stone. Now this thing kept flowing. Then the next thing that came along right after my life stone was, okay, this is my life stone. This is how I'm gonna the guidepost, the beacon, the lighthouse for how I'm gonna live my life. So the next step after that is what happens when I die? And we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. But in terms of the normal way of thinking, what about an epitaph? What does that tombstone, life stone say about my epitaph? So actually, it becomes my epitaph. Those 20 words, if I was going to have a tombstone, that's that's what it would be written on it. Okay? But in my case, I'm not going to have a tombstone. What do I want to what is an epitaph? An epitaph traditionally is what's written or summarized about me somewhere. And I felt what I want is an epitaph, and what an epitaph can be is not just to have the words, but oh, given living and dying the way I feel about them, I made a verb out of it, epitaphing. An epitaph is the words, and given my 20-word epitaph, if I want somebody to remember me the way I would prefer, people can remember a person, a deceased person, however they want to. But the way I feel about it is what I would prefer is don't read things about me or light candles or anything like that. Epitaphing, if you're thinking of epitaphing me, take what I wrote to when you are in a particular situation, bring your own good energies in a way, in a tiny way to make that situation better for anybody involved. Uh, I'll use the example of my brother. My brother, deceased, he liked plants. He was a gardener. So it made me sensitive to gardening and plants and like that. So for me to do epitaphing of my brother, when I see a plant that attracts my attention, what I do is instead of looking at it and just feeling it's pretty, I'll go over to it and stroke it and touch it. And that's my way of epitaphing my brother. That okay, I'm carrying on a part of my brother's life. And so again, with the living and the living dying duet thing, wait a second. I am continuing the living of a certain part of my brother by epitaphing him. And again, this is a continuation of this whole flow, and bringing those good energies happens anytime, anywhere. When I'm walking along, and the person is laying the bricks, and he very carefully puts the cement there, and very carefully puts the brick. To walk up to him and say, "Wow, you're an artist. That's beautiful the way you're doing that." That's sensing a situation and bringing a bit of good energies into that situation. Or telling the security person at the grocery store, "I'm glad you're here. I feel safer coming into the store because you're here." 1,000 different little ways. That's what I'm referring to about my epitaph. And that relates back to the living dying duet in the sense that okay, there's a living part of me and a dying part of me and of you and of my family and everybody. And one thing I can do in the living dying duet is the living can go on after the person has died in our way of looking at it and thinking of it. Like my brother, I feel like that is keeping him among the living in a certain way. And and so that's a result of the whole approach of the living dying duet. So that's the whole flow of how I got to the living dying duet and actually beyond it. Up to epitaphing was the last formal step that dementia had drawn me up to, and I'm now going to take it to the next step. What is the living dying duet mean for after somebody is dead in the normal way we look at it? And I'm as happy for my dementia to pull me along and clarify this question. I feel like my dementia is already doing that by by providing me with the word epitaphing, which is bring the living of somebody along after they're formally dead. Okay, and I expect that now I see that I already expect that my dementia will continue to pull me along, but that's where I'm at right now. After the epitaphing, dementia will bring me along to the next step. So let's now go a little bit more into what the living dying duet, what effect it has on our life. So if you're interested in the living dying duet, let's talk about what that means for us in our life. And we've said a couple of them already, that the realizing that living and dying are both active within me, we can realize that each one affects the other and gives more meaning each one to the other. As we said before, uh, dying makes living more immediate, and living makes dying more meaningful. And again, another thing which we mentioned before is the living dying duet, uh, because it's going on and living is more immediate. I filter out or recognize, first recognize and then filter out the noise and let go of it and release it. Wow, so I'm already exercising release, feeling release and exercising release, which is also having a really big impact on my life. Um, and also, it's helping me be more aware of my feelings, things that I just hadn't had the capacity within myself to feel because I was busy thinking and I was busy dealing with noise. When the living dying duet and the realizations and the feelings that come from that come into place, I can be more aware of myself, who I am, and we could call that to be more authentic. I'm careful about the way I use words, but I could think that it does apply to being authentic. And then let's say uh, what is the living dying duet? The music that I play. Wow, what that music I'm playing is how am I gonna live my life? How I'm playing music. I'm not just here going with the noise that's around me. What music will I play within this feeling of the living and dying, the living dying duet happening all around me? So the living dying duet isn't just like somebody over there playing a dance. The living dying duet is living and dying dancing a duet within me. And just to follow up on the last point a little bit, the living dying duet is partly learning and becoming sensitive and feeling something, the living, the dying, and the living dying duet. But it's also about letting go. about release, about feeling what is not part of how the music I want to play, for example. It's about realizing and letting go of things that are not really me and and allowing the space for things to come along that are really me. And that's the word release has become really in front of my face a lot, and it's a delightful feeling. Release from a lot of things. And it actually started already back there at the beginning when I was only feeling dying and suddenly living appeared also. I can actually, as I feel everything that's happened, uh, everything started right there. A base understanding that I had was adjusted and changed, and actually part of it was gotten rid of. And that was a huge release, and that has continued throughout. And when I said before, everything is surrealistic, yet surrealistic in the sense that it's not according to the real that I had before. With dementia, my life has a different real about it. And to recognize dementia, I call this the golden moment of my dementia. I, I feel like these are the benefits I'm having from dementia without yet paying the price of where dementia leads. And dementia leads to a horrible place, horrible for the person who is the patient, like myself, horrible for the caregivers, all the people who are around the patient, the family who has to watch their loved one disintegrate. It's horrible. And so I don't want this, the way I'm presenting this, to say, wow, I'm having a good time having dementia, because I realize that this is a flow, and the flow has been good to me up to now. I'm already feeling very much the disintegration of my brain, and I'm realizing I'm almost done with my golden moment, and it's going to go somewhere else. And I won't go into the details of that at all, but I will say it's advanced enough that I'm making preparations for what the next step is going to be as I feel the golden moment going away. And I feel, and that's what's happening right now. I consider it a gray zone. It's not, with dementia, it's not like taking blood pressure and you see the numbers and you know exactly where you are. It's a gray zone. And it's for me, it's getting much grayer, and I'm getting closer to the point where it's the difference between being functional and non-functional. And I am getting close to the point of being non-functional. So everything that's happened up to now will switch the flow. The living dying duet will change its balance, will change its dance, and take me to another place. And that relates to dying and to death in the sense that I see that as a change of the living dying duet. That the day will come when dying will take the lead and actually be much more a part of the dance than living is at all. So that change of balance between living and dying, that's what we are calling death, and that's also in epitaphing is the dementia approach, bringing some of the living forward and continuing it even after death, as we refer to it, has taken place. So I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate that you've uh, participated here and that we have a chance to talk about the living dying duet. And uh, I don't, I'll be blunt about it. I don't sell anything. I'm not selling anything here. There's nothing on the website, the Alzheimer's Conversation, that's for sale. this is where I'm at, and this is what I'm doing with myself. This is to use the situation I'm in to try to bring benefit to of some kind to somebody else. So I welcome you to go to the alzheimersconversation.com to look through the journal of all of the many different things that have happened over the last 3 years. And on this particular topic, livingdyingduet.com is the place to look. So thank you very much. And I welcome any comments or feedback that you may have. Be well. Bye bye.